Hello there, Rebus Forever here. I'm going to be taking a look at Cruel Seas. Cruel Seas is a fast-paced naval combat game focusing on the smaller, often unnamed vessels of World War II. While the big ships often sat in harbour, though named and resplendent, they were far too important to risk as a rule. The smaller vessels, from the escorts and destroyers down, were the workhorses of most nations' navies, defending coastlines and convoys or committing to daring offensives against enemy shipping or hostile harbours. The names of great battleships and battlecruisers like Hood, Bismarck or Yamato are well remembered. But the reason this game really resonates with me is because it attempts to bring to life an overlooked and thus often forgotten chapter in the histories of the nations of World War II. Anyway, enough about that. Here's an approximation of what you get in the box. This isn't everything because it's sort of quite the chaotic affair with all of the tokens and everything else. They seem to have a good sense of what helps to make a game easy to play. We'll get onto that a bit more later on. In the box you've got a selection of dice. D6s are sort of weirdly smaller than even the ones by Games Workshop that are small and white, but anyway. You've got some D10s. These are used for aiming, mostly, so far as I can gather. These are your faction dice that help you decide or work out whose turn it is. You have an alternating activation thing. You've got some D6s. These are used for working out damage. These are plumes and some torpedo tokens that help make play easier. Some fire and smoke, and also for when you are dropping a smoke screen. That said, that kind of reminds me of something. And we have some wake tokens. These help you remember the speed that your ship's been travelling at and also help work out turns, which can also be done with these range rulers. There's lots of handy dandy stuff there. You get a stat card for each ship. Tells you its point cost with different crew and also weapons options. Gives you a place to track any damage that's occurred to your ship. And also has this damage tracker, so you can actually track the whole points rather than just the damage effects. You can also see a place there on the top left for additional equipment. I have yet to interact with that at all. One genuine complaint would be, though it's nice to get a painting guide, the instructions are a bit lacking. I mean, it's pretty simple from looking at the various different pictures, but the lack of instructions on some of the other ships that I've bought, eek. Next up, let's have a quick look at the rulebook. Unfortunately, it's a softback affair. However, it's nicely laid out. There's lots of history in there. There's a colour photo on basically every single page. There's a few misprints and a few instances of a stat not being displayed in one reference box. Some continuity there would be nicer. This is the first thing that I've ever owned from Warlord Games, and overall, I have to say, for a sort of less major games producer, I'm pleasantly surprised. There's no immediate need to buy any expansions or anything else unless you're really smitten with the game. This is one of the early war British boats. I've gone a bit over the top with the wash. This is the more mid-tier, slightly more effective British unit that the box set provides you with. I'm happy with the camouflage, but again, I've gone way over the top with the wash. If you spend a bit more time putting these together, you will get much better results, I suspect. This is an example of them on their sprues. Pretty basic construction. It's the sort of game where if you're building it with someone else, you can expect to get all of the parts put together pretty quickly so that you can play a game. Which is nice. On to the Germans. Here we have their earlier model of boat. You get two of these. Slightly more powerful units, so there's slightly less Germans compared to the number of British ships. But the German ships, in my experience so far, are pretty overpowered. There's a comparison just to get an idea of the relative size. Also, if you buy from the website, I don't know if the offer's still available, but you get this submarine. Should say with the submarine that it's made of metal, so expect to have to repaint it repeatedly as it gets chipped off. Here's an example of the latter war German S-boat that's provided in the box set. And there's an example of the German sprues. Again, fairly simple, and the only complication I found was trying to work out which weapons went where. But yeah, they're not bad. So in total we get 4 German vessels. That's 2 early and 2 later war S-boats, or E-boats. The difference being exclusively whether or not you're using the German or the British terminology, or Allied. And for the British you get 6 Vosper, both mid-tier, though one was designed later than the other. As with the Germans, you've got a better and a less better ship. Games of Cruel Seas can be played either in scenario form, with set forces as described by the scenario, or else it's possible to play points-based games. The rulebook even tells you how to work out points costs for ships that aren't actually listed in the rulebook. This should make it possible to field ships from pretty much any fleet if you can find them in an appropriate scale, assuming you work out the points and everything fairly, and your opponent is fine with that. On the subject of scale, for the larger vessels, the game uses the 1-350 scale, whereas for the smaller vessels, the game seems to be using the 1-300. Here's a picture of a Liberty ship next to a standard freighter. So I think the sort of concession with scale makes sense. You can get more detail on the smaller ships, and the bigger ships still look acceptable just because they are so much bigger. Games of Cruel Seas involve you having one of these faction dice for each of the ships in each of your fleets. You put these in a bag, you pull one out at random, and whoever's icon is displayed on the dice gets to move a ship. So we'll put his activation dice next to him. He's currently moving at combat speed, which means that I can only advance to full speed or slow speed. It wouldn't be possible for the ship this turn to make the decision to stop or reverse. To do that, first of all, you would need to spend this turn reducing your speed to slow speed. If we look at this chart, we can see that we would be able to move 26 centimeters in this turn, and our turn angle is 45 degrees. I'm going to be slowing the vessel down to slow speed, which will enable it to make one turn at the end of its movement, up to 45 degrees. So to demonstrate movement, I will move this ship forward 13 centimeters. I'll move this British ship aside. We place the range ruler next to the ship, and we use the angle denoted by the ship's stat. Here we have a 45-degree turn angle, and for every third of our ship's movement that we've moved, we can make a turn. So that would leave this ship approximately here. If this ship had been moving at its full speed, it would be able to move 39 centimeters, and it would have been able to turn 3 times, allowing for quite a degree of maneuverability. At the end of your ship's movement, you can then choose to fire your ship's weapons. If we imagine this German vessel has just finished its movement phase, and it's now going to begin shooting, we then look to its stat card, and we can see the firing arcs of its various different weapons. In this instance, all 4 of the German ship's weapons would be able to fire at the British ship, and since all of our shots have to target the nearest enemy, unless our crew is sufficiently experienced, it would then be time to roll to hit. So you pick a weapon, and then refer to the modifier chart, and then roll a d10. In this instance, we will just shoot with the 37mm. This isn't a fair representation, so I won't be applying any modifiers, and also just to keep things simple, but it's easy to imagine how speed and the target size would affect things. Rather than rolling above a certain amount, in this game you have to roll beneath 5, or whatever the modified number that you need to roll is. And we've scored a 2, which is a hit. The 37mm on board the German ship does 4 dice worth of damage, so here we go. 6s can cause critical effects, and with torpedoes you'd get to roll another dice worth of damage. So that would cause 14 points of damage to the Vosper, which would be tracked along here and here. And given that the ship only has 40 hull points, You would expect that after the German ship has fired the rest of its weapons, the British ship's going to be in a bit of a patchy state. Once one player's used their activation dice on a ship, another dice will be drawn at random from the bag of activation dice remaining. This could result, if there's a game involving a number of ships on each side, this could result in one player having all of their moves in one go, and then another player just basically having to watch and deal with that random occurrence. And other games where it's much more mixed back and forth. I quite like this, as it accounts for the tactical vagaries and random events that occur in real-life fights at sea or anywhere, really. And with the large amounts of damage that even one weapon can cause on another ship in one round of shooting, you can see how one fleet could decimate another relatively quickly. There are numerous other complexities to this system. There are various different weapon systems. There's factors like spotting a ship. There's equipment that you can get, and a whole load more. But the movement and the shooting, which are the core components upon which everything else rests, appear to be relatively solid systems and pretty quick. Players activating their units at random as a consequence of these dice is a pretty good system that stops, like in 40k, where you can sort of spend half an hour watching the other person take their move, doing very little, bar rolling the occasional save throw. In this game, nobody should find themselves doing nothing for too long. So yeah, that's the gist of the system, and I think it's fairly robust. I'm looking forward to playing more games, and trying to dispel myself of the notion that the German ships are all inherently overpowered. I'll probably be showing off the German and British fleets individually, as I still have those to demonstrate, as I got quite a lot of Cruel Seas stuff for Christmas. So if you like this, please subscribe to my new little channel. If you dig the more laid-back tone of my content, then go and search out Rebus Forever for more gaming-related stuff on my main channel.